Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the kitchen table, and welcome back to our very special series on Rally Day, which is on the, David Evans?
September the 22nd.
September the 22nd.
22nd.
What did I say?
No, don't clip your twos. Or
don't clip my twos?
No,
right.
it's me.
Oh, it was you.
September
okay.
the 22nd.
It's always a delight having Autosport's David Evans at the kitchen table with me. September the 22nd, Rally Day, David. Listen, last time you were at the kitchen table, we had a lovely talk about Italian rallying, and in particular Mickey Biasion, who will clearly be at Rally Day, which is a fantastic coup for the organisers to have such a wonderful world champion along. But that's not where the celebrations end. We're celebrating Italian rallying. But this year is a very special year. David Evans, Motorsport Magazine, the world's #1 motorsport journalist. Okay, maybe not rally journalist though.
Hardly.
You know, it's a very special year for British rallying, and in particular, it's a special year for the British Rally Championship.
It is 60th birthday. It's a huge one, and that's a big part of
my favourite mug, Oregon Trail Rally. My favourite.
Well, that's not really on message, is it, for either Prestone, BRC? Or
so you were saying before I rudely interrupted.
So 60th anniversary, 60th birthday, and they're joining forces to...
Just you talk. Keep talking about why we're joining forces. Keep talking. No, but keep going.
To... I'm so sorry about this. It happens a lot. There we go. I'm going to shut the door as well.
Yeah, good idea. You can tell we're organised this morning, can't you? Let me just mic myself back up.
So it's 60th birthday for the British Rally Championship, and
it sounds to make yourself up.
There's a whole host of drivers coming. Obviously, Elvin Evans is going to be there. That's quite a big deal. Elvin
on message.
But we're going to revisit at Rally Day some classic fights. Obviously not on the track, but you know, the likes of having Jimmy McRae there, Russell Brooks. These are iconic names from the sport's past. Yeah,
you know, the British Rally Championship, David, 60 years, and within those 60 years, you can chart almost the progress of world rallying within the 60 years of the British Championship. At times, the British Championship has been ahead of the World Rally Championship, and at times, it's been a bit behind, as we are, perhaps you might argue now. But within those 60 years, my goodness me, there have been some characters. And as you say, we've seen some remarkable fights, remarkable battles, from the days of McRae and Brooks to McRae and Burns. You know, we've been privileged to see such high quality rallying over 60 years in the UK. But let's talk about the early days, about our very first British Rally champion. Who was that? Remind me.
Ron Goulburn.
Ron Goulburn. Now, I have to admit that before I did my research, Triumph what?
Triumph. TR3.
Do you know, I'm going to tell you another little story.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a story. My ex-girlfriend's grandmother, do you know, in those days, she was quite a prominent rallyist.
Really?
And do you know what she rallied? No. This woman was incredible. Lola Grounds was her name. She was from Spain. She married Frank Grounds. Now, Frank Grounds, anyone who was involved in, well, British rallying, but in particular the motor industry in Birmingham in the 50s, 60s, 70s will know the name of Frank Grounds, because he was the Jaguar dealer, and he had dealerships in Lichfield and all over the place. And his wife, Lola Grounds, who was a formidable 4'10" tall, she rallied Jaguar XK120s from the factory.
Really?
In those days, she was part of that scene. So, you know, the Midlands was very much the heartland of British rallying, wasn't it? It was where it was born, more or less, I would suggest, in the 50s.
In 58?
In 58. Yeah, because the other little story that I'd like to tell about the early days, because I have two stories to tell, then I'll shut up, is about the co-driver.
Of Ron Gould.
Correct. The first co-driving, or the first co-driver winner of the British Rally Championship was born not 3 or 4 miles from here. Stuart Turner, born in Stone in Staffordshire, just down the road from me. And you know, he went on. You forget that Stuart Turner had a career as a co-driver, and that's how he got involved in rallying. But he went on to be a giant in the world of motorsport, and in particular in rallying, and was instrumental, really, in Ford, in particular. People remember him for his days at Ford.
And BMC. You know, let's not forget, you know, you look at all of the early 60s, the wins on Monty with Paddy Hopkirk and co. And they were all masterminded by Stuart Turner, who was, and you know, he was fresh out of winning the RAC rally with
with Evans, just let us know on the comments
Mr.
below.
Sub, Eric Carlson. I'm so sorry. That mug completely distracted me. Of course, was it 1960 that they did the first ever, we've digressed slightly, first ever special stage, which was Monument Hill, just out the back of Dalmally in Scotland.
Monument Hill, yes.
Yeah.
Now there's another stage called Monument in Wales, not far from Bilth that they use as the power stage.
Yes.
So Monument Hill, completely different. Monument Hill is beautiful.
But we're back to Stuart Turner. So we can ask, and Stuart Turner is coming to Rally Day. Therefore, we can ask him all about this.
So a man who spans the full 60 years of the championship, our very first co-driving champion of the British Rally Championship at Rally Day. How good is that?
That's epic.
You know, and there'll be a lot of people who have been involved over the years, but we talked about it earlier on, about the days of McRae and Brooks. I think we could quite justifiably argue that those were the heydays, because it wasn't just McRae and Brooks. You look at the teams that those guys were involved in, the other drivers that were competing, multiple world champions.
Yeah, and you earlier this morning you were saying about the teammates that they had. The likes of Henry Toivonen and Ari Vatten and
Walter Roll.
But you also mentioned earlier on the program here that it was a follow-on from BRC straight into the World Championship. You look at Ari Vatten, second time he won the championship in 1980. The next year he won the World Championship. And it was absolutely a progression. And you're quite right, I think, that at times the BRC was more the place to come than the WRC. But I would, in terms of a championship fight, I would take umbrage with, or I would argue with your analysis that it was early 80s was the heyday.
Right.
Because I would point you to mid to late 90s when we had Formula 2.
Yes.
And we had so many manufacturers, Nissan, Renault, Vauxhall, Ford.
And you remember making money, drivers making good money out of the British Championship.
Absolutely. And the profile of the championship for me then was never higher than in 97 when we went to the Manx.
Yes.
Five drivers, all with a realistic chance of winning the championship.
Remind us who they were. We had well, Higgins was Higgins there or thereabouts?
Martin Rowe, Alistair McRae.
Was Colin there in 97 or not? No.
No, Gwyndaff.
Yes.
Martin Rowe, Alistair.
But do you know
Higgy, Robbie Head.
Robbie Head. Well, now you just proved the point I was going to say.
Sorry, Robbie.
Which was that, those were magnificent days in terms of British rallying, and all those drivers were very, very good drivers. They all accomplished a lot in their own way, but none of them really went on to greater things in terms of rallying. Why do you think that was? Because the British Championship at the time, as you say, it prepared you well in terms of the learning and the discipline.
But that, for me, that cuts to the heart of a debate that's rolled on with the BRC for years. What is the BRC about? Is it about the most entertaining and competitive championship in British rallying? If that's its remit, for sure, 97, it never got better than that. Or is the job of the British Rally Championship to prepare our drivers for the next level to go into the World Championship? If that's the case, then you'd have to say actually the early 90s, when Colin won 2 championships, Richard won the championship in 93, Malcolm won it in 94. So it's hard, it's something that I constantly debate with myself about where and what is the BRC for.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid question, particularly with recent happenings in terms of the British Rally Championship. What is the purpose of the British Rally Championship? Well, for sure it was about giving the British rally public the best possible entertainment in the stages, and we've seen that over the years with some of the most incredible machinery in those 60 years of rallying, from the Mark 1s, the Mark II Escorts, to the introduction of the four-wheel drives. Michel Mouton, you talk about the Manx Rally, Michel Mouton in the Quattro on the Manx Rally. We have seen the best drivers and the best cars all demonstrating what they can do on the stages in the UK, and that's all been down to the continuation, shall we say. I was going to say the continuing success, but as we mentioned earlier, it's had its ups and downs, but the continuation in the 60 years of the BRC, we've been fortunate in that regard.
And it remains relevant, because last time we talked about why do Italian drivers struggle, because they have very much a predominantly asphalt championship. But you look, we talked to Timo Jockey about where does Calais Rovanpera go this year, and there was a really good chance that Calais would come to Britain to do BRC, because we have a real mix of asphalt and gravel rounds. And Jari Matti Latvala, when he was 17, he came with Timo Jokki's backing, he came and did the British Championship for a year.
As did Nicholson. Nicholson, I don't know if he did the Championship, but he did a number of rounds in the UK, didn't
exactly.
he?
And for me, it still remains relevant. You know, it's very difficult at the minute because we've just lost the Isle of Man, but still, you know, the Ulster, these kind of events are classics, and you know, they teach you so much, and so much that you can carry forward.
You know, and then we're slightly digressing, but we are talking about the British Championship. But that brings me to something that you wrote a fantastic article with Matthew Wilson on a drive in a Bentley on the way down to, where were you going to? You were going to Spa.
Yeah.
And I thought Matthew made some really relevant points, and it was a lovely, honest interview. But the one point he made, which is something I've thought about over the past number of years, is that, you know, he doesn't think he learned how to win, because you couldn't, you know, the path that he took in the World Rally Championship, which was the experience path, leading to the wins, didn't actually teach you to win, because the experience you were gaining was always just experience of the roads and not necessarily experience of competing. That, I think, is where potentially the British Rally Championship has its really core USP, in that, okay, you can look at a few years and say, well, it wasn't particularly competitive, but the majority of years, if you go to the UK, you compete in the British Rally Championship and you win in the British Rally Championship, you have to earn it. You have to earn it, and for me, that is the biggest attraction of the British Rally Championship, particularly for young and up-and-coming drivers. And it allows you to experience competitiveness and to learn to win, which is a whole different ballgame.
And to go back to pick up exactly that point, you know, you look at the resurgence after a terrible end to 2015 for Elvin Evans in 16, and he said, you know, he had to get back to winning rallies. And Malcolm put him in the British Championship to win rallies, and it worked. You know, it gave him that confidence, and this is exactly what Matthew and Malcolm say, that there's nothing better than standing on the top step spraying champagne. It fills you with confidence.
And he would go from winning the British Championship to the WRC2. He knew the car, he knew the tyres, he knew how to win.
Yeah, and then he came back to WRC and he won.
But the other big thing, and I have to throw this in, and it's slightly convoluted, or contrived even, because it's a wonderful fact that I have to throw at you, just to show that I have been doing my homework. You know, in the day, the British Championship delivered tremendous value for sponsors. And the greatest example of that, perhaps, maybe you can guess the greatest example of that.
Rothmans?
Well, no, because that's on a bigger scale. And that was an established company when Rothmans came. And you might argue Subaru with ProDrive as well. That's a wonderful case study that they use at universities.
Is this going to be a Swift fact?
No, it's not a Swift fact either. What is the most iconic, one of the most iconic British champions that's still around to this day?
Andrews Heat for Hire.
Andrews Heat for Hire.
Or AC Delco.
Andrews
Depends
Heat for
which
Hire.
side of the Brooks-McRae thing you say.
Okay, I want to go with Andrews Heat for Hire, because when Russell Brooks and Andrews Heat for Hire, and what's the gentleman's name who runs Andrews Heat for Hire? Don't say Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Heat or Mr. Hire, I'm sorry.
When Russell Brooks got involved in that sponsorship at the start-ish of his career, company turnover of Andrews Heat for Hire was £1.4 million, not insubstantial, clearly enough money to put into Russell Brooks and to back his rallying campaign. When Russell Brooks stopped rallying, around about 20 or so years later, still with that iconic livery on his car, company turnover?
I have no idea.
£60 million. £60 million. Now, clearly not all of that down to the British Rally Championship.
Pretty much all of it, though.
59 million of it, perhaps. But it showed you in those days, it had real clout, it had real presence, it had real coverage. The British Rally Championship.
I'm going to come back to you now on your Andrews Heat for Hire fact.
It's a great fact, though, isn't it?
On the Welsh Rally, which was obviously known as the Fram Welsh International or whatever, in those years of Brooksy driving a Manta 400s, one thing was different with his car. What was it? To all other rounds in British Championship. On the Welsh Rally, it was different to the Mintex.
Because they had Andrews and then Heat for Hire in Welsh.
Exactly. And what was it in Welsh?
Oh, I've got no idea.
Can you not remember the pictures? It was something I rent to.
Are you going to try and tell us some words in Welsh now?
No, I can't remember. Gwes I rent to or something? Something like that.
He's good. That's a lovely fact, though. But yeah, so we are celebrating at Rally Day on the 22nd of September this year. And don't forget, go to rallyday.com for your pre-day tickets. Best to do it that way. The
one thing that we haven't talked about.
Along the bottom here, along the bottom, rallyday.com.
The one thing, and one person
Well,
but
I was going to ask you a question about your highlights over the 60 years and you know, your biggest
I wasn't
standout
there
points.
for all of the 60 years, obviously.
You've read all about it because
I have.
You did.
I would say one of the highlights for me, in fact, probably the highlight. David Llewellyn, always a massive hero of mine, massive hero. So anytime David Llewellyn was competing, probably at Rally Day this year, I hope he's at Rally Day.
Isn't it? Yeah, well, he's such an integral part of
brilliant, lovely
the championship and the story of the
and
championship.
son competing as well now. Anyway, digress. So anytime that David Llewellyn was competing, preferably in the Metro 6R4 and 86, but then in the two championship years in the Celica, just loved it. Loved watching him win. But the highlight for me, I think, has to be Alistair and Burnsy in the LNX Legacies.
Right. Yeah.
Just on, I think in those days it was probably the Vauxhall Rally of Wales in '93, and standing with my father at the bottom of a hill, and we were actually on a road section. It was a closed road section, and watching Alistair leave this control. Yeah. And there was no anti-lag or anything, but he just accelerated away up this hill and up the valley, and the noise. And it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't remember which rally it was, but it was such a special moment.
Yeah,
brilliant.
No, I mean, and lots of them, you know, and that's what happens when you have 60 years worth of memories and 60 years worth of highlights to look back at, and 60 years.
What about yours? What's yours?
Well, do you know, it's very difficult with me because you know, I'll put my hands up and say that you know, I was just a casual spectator in rallying, and when I say spectator, I use that word loosely in terms of television until around about 2002 when I got involved professionally with Rothmans. But you know, I do remember sitting on a Saturday watching it on the BBC, the British Rally Championship. I do remember what's his name, that fantastic BBC sports reporter who does the Autosport Awards every year. Steve Ryder. I remember Steve Ryder presenting the awards. I remember him presenting the programmes from the British Rally Championship. But I was a casual fan in those days. But you know, for me, it was the cars. It was always the cars. It was Mouton in the Audi. It was the 6R4 that you talk about. It was the Lancias that we saw out on the stages. Those were the things that, as just you know, a young lad growing up in Dundee in Scotland with you know, an interest in everything but no particular interest in motorsports. Those were the things that you remember.
But do you remember? Take it a generation back, and you better say you do remember, because I know you do. Do you remember World of Sport?
Of course I remember World of Sport with Dickie Davis.
Dickie Davis
with the funny little,
just like yours, actually.
Was it the white hair or the white beard?
You look quite a lot like Dickie Davis. You're modern day Dickie Davis. So anyway,
about a foot.
Sorry, yeah. But that brings me on to the one person that we absolutely need to talk to, but maybe we do that in another kitchen table.
Well, who's that?
Roger Clark.
Roger Clark. Well, listen, that is a whole little programme in itself. So,
shall we?
Yeah, we will. We'll talk about Roger Clark separately. 3 little programmes now, a little mini series here. We talk about the Italian influence on the British Rally Championship and Mickey Biasion. Here we have talked about the 60 years, the glorious 60 years of the BRC. I think we'll save Roger Clark for a separate programme. So don't forget, folks, 22nd of September, Rally Day at Castle Combe. It's a great place to get to. It's nice and easy. M5, M4, just off both of those motorways. It'll take you an hour or so from Birmingham, an hour or so from London. Really worthwhile day out. Go to rallyday.com for all the details of all that's going to happen on the day. There are many, I would say hundreds of cars expected on the day.
I know.
From the very early days, from probably, it'd be great, and I'm sure there'll be something there from perhaps the late 50s, certainly the early 60s, right through to the modern machinery. Elvin Evans will be there. We've already mentioned Mickey Biasion will be there. If you can find a few bob, and it's not a huge amount of money, you can go for a ride in one of those cars. You can book a passenger ride around the fantastic Castle Combe track. So lots and lots to see, lots and lots to do, lots to keep you interested. It's a full day out and a fantastic day out. That is Rally Day at Castle Combe, celebrating 60 years of the British Rally Championship with the BRC on the 22nd of September. We'll see you there.